So, the F1 bosses, the F1 teams, they all got their sledgehammers out, and then they got told off by Toto Wolff, the daddy apparently of all F1, that they should put their sledgehammers away and bring out their scalpels. And they've spent this time over the past few weeks to actually look at the new regulations, what needs adjusting, what doesn't need adjusting, and now we're starting to see a glimpse of what those regulations are. So, as they've gone with the scalpel, we're going to go through this with a microscope. There's going to be things we don't understand, of course. There's going to be things we do understand, and we're going to look into that. But before we do that, before we start looking into these regulations, I want to address the YouTube and content creators of Formula One, because I'm getting a bit frustrated. Here's where I stand, right? I do think, firstly, that it is crazy that F1 has been doing this social media push to try and make these new regulations seem like the best thing in the world. I do think that's wrong. Regulations are always going to be flawed. There's going to be good things, there's going to be bad things about it, of course, right? But this pile-on that has happened over the past few weeks, lashing back, and it's like it's got to the point where it's almost a bit draining. Like, that. Here's the best way of describing it. Like, you get propaganda, of course. You get this sort of, saying that something is the best thing in the world, but you can get propaganda the other way. Like, just going, oh, it's the worst thing in the world, and it'd be better off if we just didn't have Formula One whatsoever, and we shouldn't have this, we shouldn't have that. And it's like, calm down. Calm the hell down. We are literally 3 races into this. It's mad. It's crazy, right? So that's why I've not really been spewing these out, to a certain extent. Obviously we spoke about the, the effect it could have on the new F1 teams last week. But I didn't want to touch on it too much, because if they're looking to adjust the regulations, then what's the point in us shouting at them for the regulations that they are clearly looking into, right? There's obviously clearly flaws, and that's important here. And I'd love to know your thoughts, but the way that I'm looking at it from my point of view, is I kind of want to address it from a safety perspective more than anything else. Entertainment is something that F1 teams, through finding loopholes in the regulations, are always going to spoil for us. But when it comes to the safety, that for me is the most important thing. So we're going to have a little look through what they're going to do, and just dissect it and see how this is going to change the experience, the safety, everything like that for the drivers. So let's jump on straight into it. We start off with the qualifying adjustments, which thankfully we've got all of it in here. So we're going to ignore the first bit because it's the propaganda part. That was obviously explaining about the fact that the drivers were having to do this super clipping, where basically they were full throttle in the straights, but because they were harvesting energy, they were actually slowing down. So here's the technical know-how. It says the total amount of permitted recharge on a lap has been reduced from 8 millijoules to 7 millijoules, or megajoules, sorry, thereby reducing the amount of energy needed to be recovered, and therefore the amount of time doing so. Okay. In addition, the maximum amount of power recovered when the driver is on full throttle but not deploying the battery has been increased to the maximum limit of 350 kilowatts from the previous 250 kilowatts. Okay. So it sounds like to me that the size of the battery of recovering has been reduced and the amount it can recover has been increased. Okay. And then, obviously the aim to, ensure the maximum time spent super clipping was in the region of 2 to 4 seconds. Okay, so that's the effects. We got 2 to 4 seconds of this super clipping. And also that it might even be lower for certain circuits. I'd be interested to see which of those circuits it would be, to see how it would affect. But that's what we're looking at. Okay, let's start off with that. So, obviously, I can't fact check it. I'm not a technical mastermind, but let's say that this super clipping is in the region of 2 to 4 seconds. Okay. So 2 to 4 seconds is still a long time. Let's take out 130R for Suzuka Grand Prix. You're probably still super clipping, what, about 500 meters before the corner? I feel like, so you're going to have the super clipping that's probably just before the break. So you're still going to have some that is still going to be noticeable, but maybe it's going to be look more like an acceptable lift and coast, as in race style. Whether that is acceptable in qualifying, I don't know. But I suppose that's when we're going to find out. I don't think we're going to find out for the next Grand Prix in Miami. I think maybe we'll get a small glimpse of that, but we don't really have like really long straights in the Miami Grand Prix. There is that one section that used to be a DRS section, but it was still not too large, right? So we're probably going to see it next month more than anything else. So that'll be a remains to be seen, but quite interesting what they're doing there on that side of things. If I'm honest, this is like the smallest part of it for me, because this is qualifying, right? In terms of qualifying, yes, it's been depressing, let's say, to watch drivers not going flat out but not actually showing it. But it's not like we're in a situation that there's super clipping going on while another driver is going at full pelt. That's not been a dangerous thing as far as I've been aware, because at the end of the day, the nature of qualifying is that the drivers like to give themselves as much space as possible, and the fact is that there is always going to be the danger of qualifying, just in the sense of there's going to be drivers on a hot lap whilst other drivers are getting their battery ready for that hot lap for the next round where they're going to be slower, so okay, might be aesthetically more pleasing, but I'm not too stressed about that, let's say. So let's go on into the races, because obviously that was a big thing. That was the thing that we were concerned about because of the because at the end of the day, that was where Ollie Behrman had his crash. That crazy changes in speed that's on there. So let's have a look. So the in-race changes are mainly targeted at ensuring sudden speed differentials do not become dangerous. Okay, so the maximum power of the boost mode will be capped at 150 kilowatts, or the car's existing deployment level if that is higher. Okay, cars will be allowed to deploy the full 350 kilowatts in acceleration zones out of corners, but will be limited to 250 kilowatts at other parts of the lap. This means that in areas defined as straight line mode zones, where the front and rear wings are open to increase speed, power will be at 350 kilowatts, but elsewhere maximum deployment will not be allowed. So Behrman would not have been able to deploy only 250 kilowatts rather than the 350 kilowatts he was using in his instance. Alright. Okay. Interesting. So I suppose that makes sense. In in racing, the whole idea of it is that it's the responsibility of the faster car that's overtaking to overtake safely. So to try and make it a case where it is safer, okay, fair enough. I kind of like that idea. I think what'd be interesting is like, so the full 350 kilowatts is 470 horsepower. We're still looking at about what, 350 horsepower for 250 kilowatts. Like, it's a drop, but is it that sudden of a drop? I think it'd be interesting to see the behavior. I think it's the thing. It's the behaviors that's the thing that's bothering me about this, right? Um, you're going to have these alternative strategies where some drivers are going to um, utilize their boost in different areas, right? Looking at this, the most sensible option sounds like it's going to be to use the boost going out of the corners and then no other times. I mean, it'd be interesting as well that those acceleration zones out of corners. How much are we talking about here? Is it the equivalent of like one gear? Is it going to be the case that you're only going to deploy the full 350 kilowatts in second gear or third gear? Is that what we're talking about here? How is that going to be defined? And that seems quite an important one, because especially if it is a case, let's say it's in a certain gear, does that mean that it could potentially deploy when the driver's slowing down, when they don't want it to? I'm guessing that it's still in their controls with the boost button, so maybe that's a stupid comment from myself, but you got to think about safety. You got to be think about safety and make sure there's no flaws about this. I think the thing that sort of concerns me though is that, yes, that might be the most sensible option, but there'll be people that will be trying to get advantages everywhere else, surprise moves, right? So you're still going to have potentially a speed differential. A driver that has only used it for the acceleration zone versus a driver that's decided to use it for the entire straight, and that sort of like firing past in some narrow sections, that could still cause incidents. I think this is one of those ones where I'm going to say this, that Miami's going to be a great opportunity for this. Miami is tight and fairly twisty. It's got overtaking opportunities for sure, but it's going to be tight and twisty. So it'd be interesting to see, and scary to see as well, because we think that Suzuka has got fairly close walls. So does Miami. In fact, it's closer. So I'm going to reserve judgment on that one. If it feels safe from seeing the Miami Grand Prix next Sunday, sorry, then I'm fully on board with it. Fully on board with it. Okay, wet conditions. So there's been concerns about, would it cause spin outs and things like that in wet conditions? Fair enough. So they're going to, simple sort of thing, they're just going to reduce those maximum levels to limit torque and improve car control. They haven't revealed the exact limit. And then a simplification of rear light systems to improve visibility and reaction time for following drivers in poor conditions. Okay. It'd be interesting to see how clear it'll be. I think this has been the thing that has bothered me the most about wet condition races. It used to be fun watching wet races, but actually, when you think about it, like, it's dangerous because even when those lights are flashing at their full speed, you probably still can't see it. And I wonder whether I wonder whether there needs to be a little bit more sensibleness, let's say, uh, behind this. Um, that maybe we have something that, if anyone sees like sim racing games, you'll see that they have like a sort of not just a differential to see how far ahead someone is, but also like a tracker. Like you can have a sort of thing that basically goes, car tells you the distance that the car is ahead of you, um, and that basically maybe like an audible beep when someone is slowing up quite. I don't know, something that feels a bit safer, because I think for me, regulations aside, the light system in wet conditions really needs looking at for me. Really needs looking at. But anyway, last thing is the race starts. So they're going to be trialing a new race start for Miami. And there's already been one near. There's that one near miss, yes, of course, where Colapinto almost got wiped out by Liam Lawson. We have had that happen. I think was it in the 80s. Terrifying incident. So there's going to be a low power start detection system that will identify cars with abnormally slow acceleration. There'll be an automatic deployment of the MGUK, which is not normally allowed at starts below certain speeds, to ensure minimum level of acceleration and mitigate start-related duress without introducing any sporting advantage. A visual warning system featuring flashing rear and lateral lights change the restrictions of energy that have been introduced to prevent cars arriving at the grid with low battery levels. Okay, the low battery levels fantastic. If they're going to do something like that, then brilliant. Smart move. How are they going to do that? Because a lot of drivers don't know how much battery they've got left. That's another matter altogether. The MGUK is an interesting one, but that's being operated when if the driver doesn't start off with the normal acceleration. Whether that's a loophole that could be pushed, whether a driver could do something clever where they do like a sort of a juddering start or a wheel spin start that I suppose no, not a wheel spin start, but a juddering start that gets the MGUK involved, and then they take advantage of that. I don't know. There could be something clever in there, and if someone does find a loophole in that, I think fair play to them. Incredible stuff. The flashing rear and lateral lights. Okay. Whether the driver will be aware of that by the time it happens, I'm not sure. Because at the end of the day, I mean, this is the thing, right? If you are following a car that's moving at a good speed and then they dart out of the way, and similar to Billy Munger's crash a few years ago, are you going to be able to do anything about it? I don't know. But I think if they can put in something there, and maybe they can do something where it doesn't, it sort of is punishing the driver still. So maybe they could do something where it's sort of the MGUK firing up uses up more energy than just the boost. So if there is a driver that's having a false start, that their low acceleration that would have happened where they would have lost a lot of places, that they would still have it sort of during the lap, that they're almost running on borrowed energy, if that makes sense. Maybe, I don't know. I think at the end of the day that that thing of it's not introducing any sporting advantage, well, it kind of is, because you were going 1 mile an hour and now you're going 10 or something like that. Like, it is going to provide a sporting advantage. So maybe it can be a case of it gives on the the first corner and takes away for the rest of the lap. I don't know. Be interesting. Now, as I said from the start, I'm not someone that has a technical know-how. There's probably someone that has found a massive flaw in this. I just hope that this wasn't necessarily like the bosses of the teams and more like the technical guys providing their evidence and providing their details so that they can agree on something together. I'd be interested to see who's happy, who's not happy with it. But yeah, fascinating to see. And I think, look, it's important that this is sorted. Hugely important, because we get reminded fairly regularly that when it goes wrong, it really goes wrong. I mentioned the Billy Monger incident. We also had a situation that happened in the Nürburgring last week where Juha Mietonen died on track at the Nürburgring. It was where Max Verstappen was racing. There was a 7-car crash. It was horrific. This guy, I think, is he like 60? He's in his 60s or something like that. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, really sad. Really, really sad to see. And this I think the fact that it's at the Nürburgring kind of makes me think about how important this is, because especially thinking about Niki Lauda at the Nürburgring, and that horrific incident in the 70s, for example. No one thought that there was a problem or an issue until there was. And that's the difficult thing on safety. It's a gruesome and grim fortune teller, for want of a better word. But basically, you have to try and predict the most horrific thing that could happen using the regulations. Now, we got lucky in Formula One. Sadly, Mietonen has died. Juha Mietonen. And the thing that's important here is this could have happened to anyone. We could have been referring to Ollie Behrman in this way a couple of weeks ago. Life-threatening conditions, right? No one thinks that there's an issue until there is. Now, to F1's credit, when it came to the Halo, they managed to be that grim predictor and save Romain Grosjean's life. I just hope that the changes that are being made to the regulations does make sure it's safe and we don't have an issue again. We don't have a situation that happens because, like I say, with the current regulations, I could have easily imagined a 7-car crash at the start of a Grand Prix because one car is doing something unpredictable that even the driver of that car didn't know what was going to happen. And there is still some unpredictability about it. Is it going to be enough? I don't know. Rest in peace, Juha Mietonen. It's horrible when it happens. Much of love to the family as well. We really need to make sure we don't have this happen ever again. Forget Formula One. Forget endurance racing. Just motor racing. Full stop. We cannot have this happen again. Because we could be back to the blood sports of the 80s, which for a lot of my family was uncomfortable to watch, but it's uncomfortable to watch for everybody, yeah? Anyways, I'd love to know your thoughts on everything. Regulations, have they gone far enough? Have they gone too far? Have they looked at the wrong thing? I'd love to know your thoughts. And as always, guys, don't forget to like, subscribe, and take care.